stand up for our communities and democratic values. That's what it's all about. What the Republican legislature did was shocking, it was undemocratic, and it was without any precedent. But you turn it around very quickly.
Okay, so that was in the Oval Office yesterday, praising the so-called Tennessee Three. Two of those Democratic lawmakers were briefly expelled after this routine on the floor of the House chamber with the bullhorns. This was a protest of the State House after the deadly mass shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville down the street. Will Cain, Fox and Friends Weekend co-host with me now. Will, nice to see you. Good morning to you. For Biden, this works well for him. The families of the victims did not get the invite. Neither did the cops who ran in there and put their own lives on the line. What do you make of the photo op in the Oval Office?
Yeah, that's the perfect way to describe it, Bill. It's all the world's a stage and everyone players in it. I do think your estimation that it plays well for Biden is at least what he believes. It's shocking, by the way, just as an aside, that he says, it's an affront to democracy. If an elected group of people vote, others have broken decorum and they're voted out, that is democracy. Shouting over someone, whether or not you're at a college and you're a trans activist, or you're a representative with a bullhorn, is not democracy. But back to it playing for Biden, Bill, I think, and I talked about this last night filling in for Jesse Waters, that what he sees, what the Democrats seem to see, is everything in the world is a race play. It's all black and white. I'm not sure how this one turned into it, but he shows his priorities by saying the victims, the characters, the heroes in my play are the Tennessee Three. Not the parents of the kids who were killed in that school, not the teachers, not the officers, as you point out. Why? Because they don't satisfy the characters, the necessary characters for his race play. And he shows this over and over again. Inviting Ralph Yarl's family, which is great. Ralph Yarl's story is tragic, but not inviting any of the other victims just last week, who in some cases died in very, very similar circumstances because they don't fit the characters of his race play.
Let me play this. This is Justin Jones. Both these guys are young, 27, 28 years old. Might have a bright political future ahead of them. This is what he said outside the West Wing.
It's not left or right, but we talked to the president about how this is a moral issue, an issue of conscience, an issue in the South where we are trying to build multiracial democracy and challenge these extreme forces that, rather than passing an assault weapons ban, they assaulted our democracy, as we saw when we were expelled from the state legislature. And so we have to organize this as a movement. This is our Selma moment.
There you have it there. I guess rules are rules, Go ahead, just last thought there.
I just think he did it. He told us there, Bill, this is our Selma moment. Everyone is attempting to relive the 1960s civil rights era because they see it as the biggest morality play in American history, and they've recast themselves, regardless of the issue, into that play in 2023. It's a modern-day Selma moment, and what he says is gun control, multiracial democracy. He fits all the narratives into one answer, and none of it holds any meaning other than I'm hero, they're bad guys. That's the depth of this play, so that they can relive the 1960s.
Still waiting on the manifesto in the meantime. Will, it's nice to see you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on. Will Cain, thank you.
Glad to be here.
Fox's alert, it is official. President Biden will seek re-election in 2024, but will another Biden have an even bigger impact on the campaign? That's what they call a tease, Bill. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Perino.
Still learning. Morning to you. I'm Bill Hemry. Good morning at home. He's 80 years old, Commander-in-Chief, announcing his candidacy in a 3-minute video released about 6 a.m. East Coast time. The president will need to overcome high inflation, low approval ratings across the board, the ongoing investigation into his son Hunter's business dealings. Those topics all went unmentioned in the video, as you would imagine, in Biden's report.
So nobody's going to worry about the illegal immigrants coming over to our country and all the other stuff happening.
This campaign, what is that campaign?
But he...
Man, oh man. Just the same old grind over and over again throughout one election going into another election. The same old, same old. Nobody with a vision for America or a vision for the world. Solution to the problems. Unbelievable. Unbelievable how true the word of God is towards the blind, leading the blind, they shall both leadeth off into the ditch. Unbelievable how accurate that those scriptures actually are.
195.
This case, and could that infamous Access Hollywood tape become evidence? Plus, this political headline, it says it all, right? Fox nips tuck, CNN squeezes lemon out. What Tucker Carlson's exit in particular means for the rights media ecosystem. You're watching Ana Cabrera Reports. Stay right there.
Were you around in it?
The Ukrainian city of Mariupol, which fell to Russian forces under punishing bombardment last May.
Russian army has destroyed, demolished 70% of the apartment blocks in town. They had to build new ones, and they did. So that company that built those display houses in Mariupol, it is the same company that pays for Timur Ivanov's personal bills.
Despite claims of such brazen corruption, Putin toured the construction project last month. A request for comment on the investigation from the Russian Ministry of Defense received no reply. In France, though, the pressure may be mounting. On Sunday afternoon, the Anti-Corruption Foundation organized a small protest outside the Paris apartment it claims Maniovich still rents, demanding to know how she is allowed to spend the profits of Russia's war in the heart of France, a question so far without any satisfactory answer.
Now, CNN has reached out, Eleni, to the French Foreign Ministry. We received a statement from them that says, quote, "We do not comment on individual situations. France, with its EU partners, has ended visa facilitation for Russian citizens and has also adopted targeted individual sanctions against 1,499 Russian officials and their supporters, which resulted in an asset freeze and a ban on their entry into the European Union." No mention there, though, of Svetlana Maniovich herself. We did, of course, reach out to her, too, via email, also on that Instagram account. Perhaps unsurprisingly, though, we have not yet received any reply, Eleni.
Not surprising at all. Clarissa, brilliant reporting. Thank you so very much. Well, you're watching Connect the World, and still ahead. Newly released images of American diplomats evacuated out of Sudan. More on those who have gotten out and those left behind. That's coming up next.
There's a better way to get a fast small business.
It's falling basically apart.
In the fall, remember, about the permitting deal?
That to me seems like a very naive position
Yeah.
to have believed that this wasn't going to be the end result. It's been in Washington a long time.
At every
now it's a
level,
little
when it's
disingenuous.
at every level in life, when it's not in writing, don't believe it.
Okay, this is really good advice. Thank you so much. I'm still learning. All right, as President Biden pushes his green energy agenda, a Michigan Senate committee has approved spending millions of dollars for a Chinese-owned electric vehicle battery plant in the state. Critics worry about national security risks, and Alexis McAdams is live in our New York City newsroom with more. And Alexis has been looking forward to hearing more about this all morning.
Dana, good morning. Yeah, it's a big story in Michigan. We're talking about two massive projects backed by companies with ties to China that want to open shop in Michigan, and now hundreds of people who live there are doing everything they can to fight back. So this is where that Goshen plant plans to break ground in west central Michigan there. It's a U.S.-owned subsidiary of a Chinese battery company. The company says it will make parts for electric vehicle batteries. The Michigan Senate Committee, Dana, just barely approved the $175 million in state funds for this project just the other day. Some local officials tell me it will bring in big money and jobs for the community.
It's made enemies out of neighbors. And I'm sorry to say that, but if we're not progressive, in 20 years, this town won't look like this. And there'll be less and less and less businesses here.
So other local lawmakers are worried about national security risks, residents protesting that plan. We have no idea what they're actually making. We don't know the chemicals. There's been no environmental test. This stuff all needs to happen so that we understand what is really coming to this community. And it's not just the Goshen plant. Questions are also swirling about a Ford plant in Marshall, Michigan, about 200 miles away. The Ford Motor Company teaming up with a Chinese tech company, planning to spend more than $3 billion to build an EV battery plant there. Ford tells Fox News that while some of the parts and workers will come from China, this plant will be run by Ford. So right now, more than a dozen states have laws in the books that prevent investors with ties to foreign adversaries from buying U.S. farmland. Many others, including Michigan at this time, could soon be added. Dana.
All right, Alexis McAdams in Michigan, or in New York, talking about Michigan. Thank you.
So the waiting game's over. President Biden is in, announcing his.
Bit more. Anna?
Again, Barbara, this is a civil case, which may also impact the evidence allowed. The judge has said he will allow Carroll's attorneys to call other Trump accusers to testify. A couple of them have been named, and that her attorneys can use that infamous Access Hollywood tape as evidence to back up her case. So talk about how that evidence could come into play here, especially for an allegation that's 30 years old.
Yeah, there's a rule of evidence, Rule 415, that says in civil cases, parties may introduce evidence of other acts that are similar to the one that the plaintiff is alleging. So, in this case, what E. Jean Carroll says happened is that Donald Trump pinned her to a wall and then forcibly raped her. And the evidence that she's going to bring forward is examples of other people who claim that similar things happened to them. Now, they're not quite exact, which is why Donald Trump's lawyer sought to keep them out. But there is evidence, for example, a woman said that he used a similar method of pinning her against the wall and forcibly kissing her. Or we have the Access Hollywood tape where he talks about grabbing women by the genitals. And so those kinds of things could cause a jury to believe that the story that E. Jean Carroll is telling, which is consistent with those other things, is more likely to have happened than not, which is the standard of proof in a civil case.
Barbara McQuaid and Rahima Ellis will be watching. Thank you both, ladies. Up next, cable news craziness. Dual exits by Tucker Carlson at Fox News and Don Lemon at CNN, shaking up the media landscape. How Tucker Carlson's exit in particular could impact the GOP, the presidential primary, and again, the messaging that people are taking in. We're following it all when Ana Cabrera Reports returns.
And his job rating is in the low 40s. No one's ever gotten reelected with that kind of job rating. And you generally try to be as non-political as possible going into the race. But I think he wanted to secure the nomination, and I think he has today.
Right. If he can win an election based on that answer. What you described there, Mark, and what Dana points out is what happened in 2020. Once he's got 49% of the primary vote in South Carolina, he was sailing, and then he beat Bernie Sanders in Michigan, and the game was pretty much over. But I'm looking at this NBC poll, and this is what they write. They say substantial majorities of Americans don't want Trump or President Joe Biden to run for president 2024. What happens, Mark, in American politics when you hold an election that no one wants?
Well, you get some very unhappy voters. That's why.
At all to deploy troops themselves to secure that port. Clearly they've been able to negotiate that, so that is a significant step forward. But the issue really is the length of this ceasefire holding and the conditions in Khartoum. And we were sent a voicemail by a Sudanese individual whose name we're keeping a secret because he was able to communicate in very clear terms, I think, just what ordinary people, whether they're locals or international citizens, are up against. This is what he sent us.
I don't know if you can hear this, but there's now shots fired as I'm speaking with you. As for the food situation and the supplies, food is okay, but shops are running out of food completely. All the factories in Bahrain have been looted by some people. And as for the water supply, still we don't have water for the 11th day continuously. We only get water from a well nearby. I wish to stay to see how this is gonna progress. If it's gonna be worsened, definitely I will escape. There's no other way, or it is what it is. War, you cannot stay at war situations.
Now, Eleni, because of that war situation, he mentions there, food is in short supply, water in short supply, fuel in short supply, vehicles very difficult to get hold of, and then you have the dangers of crossing multiple front lines in a highly chaotic conflict situation if people need to get out over land. Now, there is some hope that this ceasefire may facilitate that. We're not getting any strong indications that it is proving a sufficiently strong a ceasefire to do that. Indeed, we've just heard there very much the contrary. So that will then accelerate planning for possible mass movements of air, possible use of Port Sudan. Every military contingency is being planned for. There have been no decisions yet as people wait to see how this ceasefire plays out over the next few hours. It was 72 hours supposedly from midnight last night in Khartoum time, Elaine.
All right, Sam, thank you very much for that reporting. We appreciate your insights, and of course, you were the first to get access to those images of the evacuees over the weekend. Thank you so much, Sam Kylie, there in Djibouti for us. Up next on Connect the World, a group of Premier League players was so embarrassed by how they played this weekend, they are offering a refund to fans. All the details when we come back.
And Tucker Carlson have agreed to part ways. Carlson anchored the network's highly rated 8 p.m. hour that topped 3 million viewers on an average night. During last night's show, the network acknowledging Carlson's exit.
I wish Tucker the best. I'm great friends with Tucker and always will be.
Carlson's departure comes less than a week after Fox News paid Dominion Voting Systems a $787.5 million settlement in a defamation lawsuit. Private texts and emails from Carlson emerged during the lawsuit, including messages from the Star anchor criticizing Fox executives, disparaging former President Donald Trump, and expressing doubts about some on-air claims about Dominion that were made on Fox. Neither the network nor Carlson have revealed why he is leaving. The popular host is also being sued by former Fox producer Abby Grossberg, who accuses both Carlson and Fox News of creating a hostile work environment, speaking exclusively to NBC News.
I reached a breaking point where the harassment was so bad that I called a crisis line.
In a statement, the network called the claims unmeritorious and riddled with false allegations. In an equally shocking announcement Monday,
Don Lemon and CNN have parted ways.
The news coming out after Lemon's Monday morning show.
So good morning, everyone. Welcome in.
CEO Chris Licht thanked Lemon, sending this memo to his employees. Don will forever be a part of the CNN family. Lemon took to Twitter with his reaction, saying he was stunned at the termination, writing in part, "I would have thought that someone in management would have had the decency to tell me directly." CNN denies the claim that management didn't offer him an opportunity for a meeting. Lemon's departure just 2 months after his controversial comments about women, specifically presidential candidate and former UN ambassador Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley is in her prime. Sorry. When a woman is considered to be in her prime in her 20s and 30s and maybe 40.
This morning, Lemon's former co-anchors reacting to the news.
Don was a big part of the show. We wish him the best.
NBC News parent company NBC Universal also dealing with a sudden exit. CEO Jeff Shell leaving his role after a company investigation into allegations of inappropriate conduct. In a statement, Shell writing, "I had an inappropriate relationship with a woman in the company, which I deeply regret. I'm truly sorry." A lawyer for CNBC anchor Hadley Gamble says the investigation into Mr. Shell arose from a complaint by my client of sexual harassment and sex discrimination. Shell and Comcast have not commented on those allegations. This morning, the media landscape is shaken. 3 influential voices are gone. CNN has not shared the reason for letting Don Lemon go. We have reached out to both Lemon and Tucker Carlson for comment, but have not heard back. Back to you.
Stephanie Gosk, thank you. And let's bring in now NPR TV critic Eric Deggans. Eric, Tucker Carlson has faced backlash for his comments on air for years, and yet it only seemed to make him more popular, more powerful. So why now? What do you think was the final straw?
It's hard to know. Even Tucker Carlson, apparently, according to some reports, doesn't know why his contract wasn't extended and he was taken off the air. As your previous reporting noted, there's a lot of possibilities. I mean, that's one of the sad things about the story of Tucker Carlson, is that there's any one of 4 or 5 things that could have been a reason why they took his show off the air. All the disclosures that came out in the wake of the Dominion lawsuit showing him disparaging Fox executives, trying to get a reporter fired who was fact-checking claims about the election, a lawsuit filed by a former producer who claims that there was a toxic and work environment and sexual harassment going on. I will note that Roger Ailes, the founder of Fox News, and Bill O'Reilly, who was the biggest star of Fox News before Tucker Carlson, were also both shown the door at that company after sexual harassment claims came forward. So this lawsuit by Grossman seemed to be something significant, but we really don't know even now. And Tucker Carlson, I don't think, has said anything publicly about why he's not there. So we still have some more reporting to do.
And yet, what he has said on air in the past, so inflammatory, so conspiratorial, and yet he was Fox's biggest star. In fact, the stock price of Fox Corp, the parent company of Fox News, dropped sharply after Carlson's departure became public, dipping more than 4%. I don't know if that has ever happened with any other individual who is on air. Does his exit change Fox fundamentally?
Well, that's the open question. He was, without a doubt, a voice that was mainstreaming really extremist views, including white nationalist tendencies, including election denialism, including trying to minimize what happened at the insurrection on January 6th. There doesn't seem to be anyone else at Fox who is that extreme yet. But one of the things that we saw, for example, once Bill O'Reilly was gone, Tucker rose to take his place as Fox News' biggest star and was a more extremist voice. So I don't think we can bet that Fox News will take a step back from the material that they're presenting simply because Tucker Carlson is gone. In fact, if their history teaches us anything, it's that once someone is gone, in order for the new person to stand out, they often take more extremist positions than the person they replaced.
That's a scary thought. Eric Dagans, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Up next on Ana Cabrera Reports, a shaky ceasefire in Sudan and a new warning from the World Health Organization about a high risk of biological hazard there. Plus, after SpaceX's Starship exploded in midair, why the program may be stuck on Earth for the foreseeable future.
I've never seen so much outlandish unprofessionalism coming from I think it's the FFA or something like that that's associated with licensing people that's either on radio, TV, or whatever. Seems like just for the past few years, I'm going to say within the past 10 years especially, we have seen things go from worse to worser on the level of professionalism of the way that our politicians degrade one another, the way that our newscasters are very prejudiced in the way that they put forth the information to the public. And to be quite honest with you, our news agencies has turned into advertising agencies, or they have turned into agencies that just want to profile whatever story that they're on in the way that they want to do it. And back whenever I was growing up, ABC, NBC, CBS, they always seemed to have wanted to take the neutral road. That way, they strictly told the news verbatim of what was happening and the way it was happening. I've never seen so much unprofessionalism, regardless whether it was coming from Fox or any of the above. And to be quite honest with you, I think that Congress should step in pertaining to these media wars towards bringing stricter requirements pertaining to airwaves. And of course, whenever you do that, you're going to have people that's going to say, oh no, you're violating our rights. That's That's our amendment rights of doing that. It is, as long as you're truthful and you're honest. But whenever you go to purposely lying to people to the degree that you have created a insurrection, then somebody else needs to step in towards governing these news agencies, other than just paying a big fine or supposedly giving their main anchorman the battle axe. So is it going to get better? Probably not. If anything, just like what they just got through talking about, it's probably going to get worse. It's going to get worse, and this is not who we are. This is not who America is in being this diversified in the eyes of the general public. And it's really sickening. It's sickening and it's sad to think that we have gone this far because of the blessings of God, and now we're going to take one step forward and two steps back. I promise you, our ancestors that are now up in heaven looking down at America are not pleased whatsoever. And you wonder how come that these forces of nature, regardless whether it's too much rain, not enough rain, bugs, insects, diseases, wars, problems in the family pertaining to divorces, churches being split, all the illegal immigrants coming over here, $33+ trillion in debt, all the inflation prices pertaining to watching how that the oil industry has basically targeted the public in gouging the public. These things is only going to incredibly increase if we don't take a deep breath and back up and realign who we are and what we want to become. Because I promise you, the direction we're going in is not the direction that our ancestors had going back 100, even 50 years ago after World War II. World War II ended basically 75 years ago. During those 75 years, America was number one in almost every industry you could think of. Today, America has lost its footing. America is no longer number one in all the other areas that we used to be number one in. So what's happening here? Because it is a fundamental, deep problem within our own fabric of our original genealogy. What's happening here? I continue to keep saying it again and again and again. It is a spiritual warfare that has now turned into a physical warfare, that has turned into a biological warfare, that has turned into an information media warfare, that has turned into a political warfare, that if we don't watch, out of all these different warfares, it's going to turn into a major calamity. And I tend to wonder if that's not what it's going to take to wake the American people up. And whenever I say a major calamity, I'm talking about something on the order like New Madrid Fault, or a major earthquake out west, or Yellowstone National Park blowing up. Because, 9/11 was short-lived. If you really think about it, COVID has been short-lived. All of a sudden, people want to go back to their same old grind in thinking, well, we're going to live, what is the old saying? Live long and prosper. Well, whenever you're going up against the grain of the Heavenly Father's timetable, first of all, you may prosper, but it ain't going to be as many people prospering, because there's going to be too many people suffering on the bottom of prosperity. And secondly, whenever it comes to living long, you're not going to live long. That's the part that the world is not accepting, even yet to this day, that I've been putting out there now for 30+ years, that we are at the end. We are in a different season today than what we was during the Reagan era. And what has caused things to belly up the way that it's bellied up is because of certain people that did not handle certain situations and certain things properly in the latter part of the Reagan era. That's the reason why we're in the predicament that we're in. And until we're willing to acknowledge that, and until we're willing to actively try to rehabilitate that, we as an American society, as well as the world, are going to steadily go backwards more and more and more. Now, you can get on TV and you can put on your nice shirts. You can put the women on TV that looks good. It's got a fancy type style in the way that they, present themselves. And you can talk pretty and nice, and you can do all the above in behind the camera. But the bottom line is this: are we moving forward, or are we going backwards? And according to this space program that they're talking about right here, do you have any idea how much wasted fuel is happening right there? Does anybody have any idea how much wasted fuel? You've got enough fuel right there being wasted in that one launch to probably fill up 10 747s to go from the East Coast to the West Coast combined together. And trust me, that is a lot of fuel, because it takes a lot of thrust to get something like that off the ground. So, in reality perspective, you're talking about you could have enough fuel right there to occupy 10,000 people the rest of their lives in normal driving procedures. The amount of fuel that rocket right there is going to waste in just a few minutes will be the adequacy of having 1,000 people drive all their lives and still have fuel left over. All their lives. And never have to worry about buying fuel again. That's how much fuel that we're wasting on just that one launch.
Rocket blew up in mid-flight last Thursday, just minutes after blasting off from a Texas spaceport. The FAA says that's standard practice, so it can do a, quote, mishap investigation. But of concern here is all that dust and debris from the explosion. In fact, some of that landed 6 miles away, far beyond the typical impact zone. And that means potential environmental risks to local residents. It's an open question now whether SpaceX will be allowed to launch again, or when specifically that would happen. Now to new developments in Sudan, where the start of a 3-day ceasefire is already being undercut by reports of violence. Sounds of heavy gunfire and explosions were reported in the capital of Khartoum, with residents saying warplanes were flying overhead. This is according to the Associated Press. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says there is a, quote, high risk of biological hazard in the capital after a national laboratory holding measles and cholera pathogens was seized by one of the warring parties. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel is joining us now with the very latest. Richard, let's first start with the ceasefire. What are you learning?
So we'll start on the ceasefire. It is still barely holding, and ceasefires are never black and white. I've seen many ceasefires come, I've seen many ceasefires go around the world, and there is often a gray area, I don't want to call it tolerable, but an accepted level of violence that international observers watch when they look at a conflict and they determine, is the ceasefire really being violated? Are these command and control issues? We are definitely into that gray area. But no indications that the ceasefire has totally collapsed. What we've seen are, there's gunshots in the streets. There have been jets overhead. One of the parties, the Rapid Support Forces, claimed that the army, the other party in this conflict, was using jets to bomb Khartoum. They denied that. So we're in this area where there is still relatively low-grade violence compared to earlier days. And that, at least, is allowing a little bit more of the evacuation efforts to go underway.
The race is on this morning to evacuate foreigners, including more than 16,000 Americans from Sudan, in case the shaky 72-hour ceasefire between two warring generals breaks down. While European nations have taken out hundreds of their nationals and some Americans on cargo planes, the best way out for large numbers is by road. Long drives to Egypt, Ethiopia, or increasingly, Port Sudan on the Red Sea coast. While the United States is not running convoys and has no plans for a mass rescue, the administration says it is providing information about routes and watching them from above with drones.
Some of the convoys that have tried to move people out, including all the way to Port Sudan, but also to places closer into Khartoum, some of them have encountered problems, including robbery, looting, that kind of thing.
The United States has also positioned a warship off the Sudanese coast near Port Sudan in case a military evacuation is ordered or to provide medical care. Another ship is on the way. But getting out is not a simple drive. Shortages of gas, food, and price gouging mean people have to improvise. Lakshmi Parthasarathi, an American travel writer who yesterday was stranded in Khartoum, this morning has moved out of the capital for safety. She's keeping a video diary for us.
I'm sitting here in a school that's been turned into a little refugee camp. Yesterday, I fled Khartoum and hitchhiked south. The city was complete mayhem when I left. There were power cuts, no running water, no access to cash, so I left with only $20.
Foreigners are leaving Sudan, or trying to, but many Sudanese worry the fighting will get worse once most are gone and the world's attention, as it has before, turns away.
Now, back to that warning from the WHO, which you mentioned before. The WHO is concerned because it has lost control. Its staff are no longer able to enter a lab in Khartoum, and they're worried because qualified staff don't have access to this. The area is controlled by one of the warring parties, that there could be a risk that the pathogens could get contaminated, they could break out, there could be a leak, and they have in this lab cholera, measles, and polio.
All very concerning. A dynamic.
Cholera, measles, and what else did he say? Polio. We ain't seen an outbreak in polio in years. It was basically eradicated. But that's just it. Whenever you have an all-out war and people are blowing up stuff, they really don't know what they're blowing up. Kind of like President Putin over in Russia blowing up daycare centers and hospitals and maternity wards and etc. Whenever you're blowing up all this stuff, God only knows what else is being exposed out into the atmosphere. In addition to the people that's close at hand pertaining to having to breathe all those toxic contaminants, kind of like what happened in 9/11 towards people to this day that's getting sick and having extreme cancer and etc. In addition to what I've talked about earlier, that every time something like this occurs, you are draining the resources. You are taking things that used to be normal, and now you're putting it in an abnormal rim that inevitably is going to make it harder on everybody, because everything is based on supply and demand, and when you no longer have the supply and the demand is higher than the supplies, the demands, what you're going to have is the people that does have deep pockets that are going to be able to basically overpower the people that don't have deep pockets. In other words, groceries are going to become so expensive that only the richest of the rich and the wealthiest of the wealthy are going to be able to live a halfway normal life while everybody else suffers. And you would think, with Africa going through what they're going through right now, with some of the areas going through droughts like they have never seen before in that country, you would think that that they would conform their resources in pulling together rather than tearing one another apart. I mean, the way that I've been told, there's parts of Africa, of course, Africa's a big country, but there's parts of Africa down on the Horn, down towards the southern part, that are so bad now that even the Zulus have come back out towards the headhunters, towards basically people eating people. People eating people, cannibalism. That even the bears and tigers and the wildlife that's used to that type of habitat can't even live out there no more because it's become that raw. And you would think, because of what they're going through, that they would be moving in the direction towards having a solution to the problem rather than creating more of a problem for themselves. But the thing about it is, whenever you have a skirmish, I'm going to call it a skirmish because it's not really what you'd call an all-out and out war. But whenever you have a skirmish like this over there, then you have other skirmishes that we've been fond about pertaining to what's went on over in the Middle East. Then you have a skirmish that could be building pertaining to China and Taiwan. And then you have another skirmish over in Ukraine, pretty close to Germany and Poland and all those other France and all those other areas that's causing the dimension of resources. I mean, just like I was talking about a while ago, that one missile that went up into the air, and I may be way off on a conservative level pertaining to being able to take 10 747s and fly them from the East Coast to the West Coast, or 5 round trips. I may be off about that. In other words, instead of it being 10 pertaining to 5 round trips with 747s, it may be more like 50. I don't know. But that was a lot of fuel that we've seen wasted just on that one project. I'm going to go ahead and tell you how conservative that I am. I'm so conservative that, first of all, I don't live like a normal person that has a hot water heater and a hot water 24/7. I only flip the switch towards turning my camper hot water heater on only whenever I'm fixing to take a shower or it's necessity for me to have hot water. Other than that, I've got a stove here that's got propane tanks, and whenever I want to heat up some water to shave or something like that, I got a pan that I put the water in and I heat it up, and that's what I shave with. I do sponge baths, but a lot of times whenever I have wastewater, instead of just taking the water and throwing it into the drain, that's nothing more than a waste, I save the water. That way, whenever I use the bathroom, I can take that water and use to flush out the toilet. And I've been doing this conservatively now ever since I basically come back here. I am trying to asphyxiate myself to where not only as a child did I get my ass torn up because whenever we would walk out of a room and forget as children and not turning out the light, we just didn't get hollered at. We got disciplined. And we got disciplined severely because at the time there wasn't a lot of money back in the 70s. And whenever my father told you to do something, you better have done it or you was going to suffer the consequences for not doing it. So I become adapted to being conservative. I have recently become adapted towards being conservative towards taking trips. You know, I'm one that really loves to be able to get in a vehicle and go to the lake or go up here at this place or go to Dyersburg or maybe go to Jackson. I haven't been to Jackson now in probably 6 months. I'm conservative with my driving because I usually sit down and do an assessment on what do I need. Well, I need to stop by the Tractor Supply store and get this. I need to stop at Walmart and get this. While I'm over that way, I'm going to stop at the parts store because I'm thinking I'm going to need this. In other words, whenever I take a trip, I try to take care of 3 or 4 things while I'm in the process of that trip. This is all trying to be conservative with our resources that we presently have right now. Because I am thoroughly convinced that our resources is going to run out, regardless whether it's the resources of oil pertaining to gasoline, or it's going to become so expensive that you can't afford it. It's going to only be the rich and the wealthy that's going to be able to afford it. The resources of the food, the resources of the water, or other resources are going to steadily be strained from here on out to the point that the prices are only going to go up and not down. And if you're not preparing yourself for that, then you're going to be hurting on down the road, especially if something unforeseeable happens, like maybe your automobile blows up, or the transmission goes out, or maybe somebody gets extremely sick, or maybe you're involved in a terrible, terrible accident. These are all things that can ruin a person, as well as the economy getting out of hand the way that it is. So every time, whenever I see like's going on in Northern Africa right now, whenever I see these things, it makes me absolutely shudder in the aspect of realizing that we're getting that much more closer to the unbearable. You know, during the time that World War II was going on, and you probably heard this from me before, things become unbearable here in America. We're talking about restricting people's gasoline, because then everything had to be dedicated to the war and the first responders, pertaining to people working in hospitals and firemen and police officers. They not only restricted that, but they restricted food, they restricted tires, they restricted so many other items, because those items was dedicated to the first responders in the war. That was 75 years ago, when people knowed how to pull together and adapt. Today, with people being as crazy as what they are, with all the guns here in America, if it comes down to the point that it gets even remotely close, like it was during World War II, and everybody having to be very conscientious in where they go and what they do, in other words, be very, very conservative with your gas, be conservative with everything, from water to whatever. And I'm sure the people in Mexico, they have learned to become conservative with their water already being on a tier 2. I'm sure some of the people out in Nevada and California and Arizona, they have learned to be conservative with their water and not just waste it just for the pure mere reason of wasting it. But that's going to become that way all over the world eventually. Right now, we're only seeing it in bits and pieces. But as we continue to go through this, every time there is a skirmish, regardless whether it be in Ukraine, regardless whether it be in the Middle East, regardless whether it be in North Africa, regardless whether it be in China or North Korea, every time there is a skirmish, it drains the resources. Now, if you'll combine that with every time that there is a major weather event pertaining to the forces of nature, regardless whether we don't get enough rain, regardless whether it gets too hot, regardless whether it don't get hot enough, those are all elements that's working on the resources. Now, as of right now, because of all the snowfall up towards Michigan and up towards the northern states, the Mississippi River is running higher right now than what it ordinarily does. Last year, we seen the Mississippi get so low that they had to put restrictions on various tugboat drivers because they couldn't go up and down the river like they ordinarily could towards pulling the same loads. Well, you're going to run into the same problem whenever the river gets extremely high. You're going to have restrictions on a lot of those tugboat drivers and a lot of other goods that goes up and down the river, because now it's gone the opposite direction because of all the melting up towards the northern states. What we're seeing is one extreme to another. It's either entirely too low or it's entirely too high, And to have the mid-range, where it used to be considered the normal, has become abnormal. We cannot go on as a society upon this planet forever doing this, going from one extreme to another, because like I said, every time it does that, it creates a problem with the resources, regardless whether it's man-made, regardless whether it's made by basically the satanic Lucifer coming down and causing these type of damages with our environment because of what we have done to the earth underneath our feet and what we've done above the clouds pertaining to our environment. These are all the problems that the Luciferian Lucifer has created for humanity. In every aspect that you can think of. Every sickness, every pain, every hardship, anything that's out of norm, you can blame it on the devil, on Satan. Because it was Satan that contaminated humanity back thousands of years ago, and it's Satan that's still trying to struggle towards being liberated from his own mistakes, and I promise you he will not be liberated from his mistakes that he created back thousands of years ago whenever he first decided to challenge the kingdom of God. That's the reason why the Bible has given us warnings and advisories and telling us ahead of time that these are going to be the things that are going to occur. Now, let's look at something else from a different factor, from a different perspective. If the windmill ministries pertaining to the founder that is talking to you right now in behind this camera, if things would have taken off the way that it properly should have taken off in 1988, in which it didn't, 1989, it didn't. 1990 and 91, it didn't. 1993, it didn't. In other times that I've stood up for the ministry, it didn't. Just like whenever I was on WENK witnessing and basically telling people the interpretation of the Bible, rather than people listening to that and taking it verbatim towards what it was actually saying, in the way that the interpreter was interpreting the Bible, I got shunned. I got basically told that if I didn't get off the airwaves, that I needed to seek employment elsewhere by Jimmy Atkins. That was the nephew to Mr. Wooten that used to own a Wooten Chevrolet garage up here in Dresden, Tennessee, that at the time I was working for his nephew in a body shop in Dresden, Tennessee. I was told that if I didn't get off the airwaves, seek employment elsewhere. That's whenever I decided to go gun-ho. That's whenever I got an individual over in Mason Hall, Tennessee, that basically made the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and I put them in the back of my truck and went on my first crusade, my son and I, up to New York City and Washington, D.C., and that's whenever I started pumping out thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of material and spent thousands of dollars out of my own pocket in trying to warn people and tell them, prepare them of things to come. Obviously, for the past 30 plus years, those things was ignored. Not only was they ignored, but I had people that was retaliating against those things that actually was trying to provoke me into going in the opposite direction. That way, it would have sure enough, I would have basically been damaging myself. I would have basically been shooting myself in the foot. And I tend to wonder if that's just exactly what the courts here in Weakley County intended to happen during a 3-year rage that my brother and I went through that costed him his life. They was hoping that there was going to be blood on the floor. And it didn't matter if it was a neighbor's blood. It didn't matter if it was my brother's blood. It didn't matter if it was my own blood. But they was hoping that blood was going to reach the level of blood being on the floor. That way, either Juby would have been dead, or Juby would have suffered the rest of his life towards being locked up in behind the bars, because now Juby's taking the law into his own hands. Either or, it would have been the ruin to the founder of the Windmill Ministries. And that's exactly what they wanted. Because you can go all the way back to 1989, whenever Homeland Security originally pursued a malice act against their own Constitution whenever they violated the founder of the ministry's Constitution by confiscating something from that ministry that they never should have confiscated. And as I've said before, it wouldn't have mattered if it was a sword. It wouldn't have mattered if it was a purple piece of cloth. It wouldn't have mattered if it was a horn or a bugle. It wouldn't have mattered if it was a horn, the horn to a goat or something that you could blow something in. It wouldn't have mattered if it was a Bible. It wouldn't have mattered if it was a cross. The state, separation between state and church, did not exist in 1989 during the founder of the Windmill Ministries in Madison County, Jackson, Tennessee, by the name of a Mr. Walker, that basically knowed very well that I was being violated at the time because they confiscated a aluminum sword from me that basically was nothing more than a piece of toy, and charged me with a deadly weapon, and I had to be fined, and also got thrown into a mental institution on account of it. According to the people in the mental institution, I had created an uproar. I created an uproar in 1989, and because I created an uproar, they was trying to settle everything down, and the way that they was going to settle everything down was chemically settle it down. And they was attacking the very person that was trying to warn people going all the way back into that era. Well, now, 30 years later, now look at the uproar. Now look at the real uproar towards what's happening in our great country pertaining to political uproar, monetary uproar, medical uproar, psychological uproar pertaining to all the violence, the gun uproar, the illegal immigrant uproar, and us being $30-something trillion uproar. If you combine all the uproars together, you got an uproar. This is what Bolivar, Tennessee is guilty of. And Homeland Security pertaining to Secret Service and Madison County, whenever they first decided that they was going to intervene in a ministry that they had no business in intervening. They wanted to make sure that I did not have any weaponry. And of course, we've seen again and again and again, anybody that knows my story realizes that there's been a constant pattern of people that wanted to violate my rights, to the point that what they done to me in 2017 was basically a nail in their own coffin, a stake in their own heart, in how that they was determined that they was going to stop me from ever even beginning to having the ability to have any type of weapon, much less a sword, towards going after the perpetrator that had caused all this damage. That was to put a felony on Dennis James Jackson's life. That's what they've been itching towards wanting to do all along. And sure enough, whenever Dennis James Jackson come back to his own home state, to his own home county in Weakley County, Tennessee, this is how they initiated me. They initiated me by killing my brother and taking all that controversy that had been going on for 3 years and all the troubles towards my brother and I being hunted and basically tormented down here for 3 years. They took it and turned the tables, and all of a sudden, now it was my fault. Because I know that the things that was going on this property, and because I done already went through that same song and dance up here north from here, about 100 miles, not quite 100 miles, over in Cadiz, Kentucky, Tree County, Kentucky, and because of the way that Western Kentucky dealt with me, the way that they did, I'd basically throw the towel in. I said, you know what? I'll do whatever you want me to do. Well, you know what? I paid the fine. I think it was $765. I was on probation for over a year, and it was supervised probation now. It wasn't just being on probation towards not getting in trouble. Oh, no, no, no. Even though I've never had a drug problem, even though I've never had a drug charge, should have had back whenever I was a teenager, but even though I haven't been violent, I haven't been an alcoholic, I haven't been on hallucinating drugs, they still put me on supervised probation. That way, every time I went to the probation officer up here in Dresden, Tennessee, to pay them my money, I never knew from one day to another, whenever I walked in there, whether or not they was going to jump me for having to pee in a cup. And if I peed in a cup hot, that was considered a violation of probation, and I'd stand back in front of a judge. So they didn't just give me a normal song and dance in Weakley County. No, no, no. They wanted me to dance the long dance. In other words, whenever they punish somebody, they can either punish you harshly or they can punish you mildly. Even though I'd never had any type of repercussions in Weakley County, Tennessee, other than a few speeding tickets, other than taking some paint and putting on the highway where my wife and I had gotten married, where I had one of my revelations at, basically had to go to court and be fined for graffiti on the highway. That was the extent of the problems that I've ever been through here in Weakley County. Now, my brother, on the other hand, that was a drunk because of the way that his father treated him. That's a different story. Other family members, those are different stories. But once more, you're not supposed to judge people, in which they do in the South, off of your relations. And I guarantee you they do that more than once. In other words, if you got a brother or a sister in your family that was a whore, or that was a drunk, or that was a this, or that was a that, the reflection will fall upon all the members of the family. That was the very thing that my grandmother told us over in Kenton, Tennessee in the early 70s, early to mid 70s, whenever my uncle got caught working for the mob up in Chicago, bringing stolen automobiles from Chicago all the way down to Atlanta twice a week, getting paid $2,000 each trip plus an airplane ticket back. That whenever they busted him in his own little hometown that he was raised up in, Kenton, Tennessee, my grandmother set us all down and said, you know what? Things will never be the same here. And boy, oh boy, was she ever so right. A matter of fact, I still believe, because of what went on in my uncle's life, which was my mother's sister, that it had a big, big reflection upon what went on in my personal life in 1983, whenever I sought some sort of a help from the authority figures in Kenton and basically got slapped in the face, while my dad got basically, he basically got a handshake over it. And that's whenever they first initiated towards wanting to put me in a mental institution, towards marking me as somebody being psychologically, emotionally, chemically imbalanced. So I've kept a scorecard on all this. Oh, don't think for a second that I hadn't. I keep up with all the receipts. I keep up with all the talk. I keep up with the news articles. I keep up with everything. But at the same time, it gives me an opportunity now, since social media platform has come into play, pertaining to AI, to record these episodes and to speak on behalf of the episode, or speak in behalf of the Heavenly Father towards what has actually occurred in my life and what shouldn't have occurred in my life. As I've said before, every time there's a skirmish, it don't matter if it's a man-made skirmish or if it's a supernatural force of nature skirmish, it reduces the resources. As the resources are being reduced, it don't matter if it's the resources of fuel, the resources of water, the resources of food, things are going to get tight. To the point that people are basically going to have to tighten their belts, or there's going to be a mass flood of people going to court filing bankruptcy, and which it probably already is. I ain't looked lately in the statistics of all that, but there'll be a flood of people that will basically not be able to make their house payments, their car payments, their hospital payments, their education payments, and all the above. Why is that? Because the system from within is regurgitating itself. And as it's regurgitating itself, the first people that it's going to affect more so than anybody is going to be the poor and the weak, the middle class. Those that's making 250 to 100,000, maybe even $500,000 a year and whatever that they're doing, they're going to be some of the ones that it's going to affect the last. But don't think for a second that if you affect enough of the small class, the weak class, that it won't eventually affect the rich class coming near a neighborhood near you. Now they think that what they've just done in Africa was a skirmish. That skirmish alone will take some people a lifetime to get over, and they may not never get over it because they may have already been struggling. Like I've told you before on other videos, you got countries right now that are literally imploding upon each other. And of course, whenever you have countries like down in South America and Mexico that's strictly been making a living off of drugs, this is part of that package of destruction. As well as seeing war break out, our troubles, our COVID, our the forces of nature not cooperating with mankind. That's the reason why I continue to say that instead of us heading towards utopia, we're heading towards a dystopia. We're heading towards total chaos coming near a neighborhood near you. And if we don't awaken towards seeing these characteristics that continually keep popping up again and again and again, it ain't just a matter of when we're going to be in tribulation. It's a matter of how bad the tribulation is going to be. To me, this is just my opinion. My opinion don't cost nothing. To me, and I think the world of our chief and commander right now pertaining to Biden. But to me, with him being at his age, there's no way that he should be eligible to run for another 4 years of presidency. He shouldn't even be on the ticket. Just like Trump and the things that he's done in the past with his life being so controversial, and the fact that he was one of the first ones that was some of the climate deniers, the fact that he was one of the first ones to want to pat Putin on the back because he was bringing destruction into the Ukrainian people's lives because of other things that's been said and done by Mr. Trump. He shouldn't be on the ticket neither. Once more, we're taking one step forward, my friends, and 2 steps back. Now, I realize the fortunate and the rich, they can go a pretty long time doing this. They can go a pretty long time because they can afford this. But those that's on fixed income, those that's already poor, those that are weak and can't get out here and work, those that are already below the poverty line, all this is only going to make their lives that much more miserable. And if we, as a society, regardless whether it's an American society or it's an African society or a Russian society or a Korean society or a Middle East society, if we don't watch, we are heading down a slippery slope that is only going to make life that much more miserable for all of us. And if you can't see that and understand that, either you're blind in one eye and can't see out of the other, Are you are incapable of understanding these things from a global level, from a big perspective level, or you just don't care? As long as it ain't affecting your life and the things around your life, towards you being selfish and greedy and you being the way that you are, you're thinking to yourself, let me hang up right here. Good luck to all of us, and once I say shalom, goodbye.